So let's call this segment 3 Unspoken Myths About People Pleasing That Kill Romantic Passion. So, do you sometimes feel drained by your relationships? And if you do, you can also just give me a thumbs up there in the comments. Maybe you feel drained by first dates or even the first emails, texts, and or phone conversations. Do you, like so many of us, feel that you always have to be nice, courteous, and kind and set aside your needs for someone else's? Now consider this. What if a lover, instead of exhausting you, could add to your energy? What if a partner can't actually fall in love with you at all when you are exhausting yourself by overgiving and people-pleasing them? What if, instead, a partner falls madly in love with you when you learn how to surrender control and open up to receive first? Now I know, oh, that sounds so easy, wonderful, and delightful, but really freaking scary, and why hasn't that happened yet? I want to assure you that relationships do not need to be exhausting. The truth is, if you feel that relationships are draining and exhausting you, it's because you are working them way too hard. And that's because people-pleasing is love's death knell. Now, in this video segment, we are going to debunk 3 myths about people-pleasing. And those include, number 1, people-pleasing is a more emotionally honest and morally good way to be in a relationship. Number 2, people-pleasing stems from empathy, and the truest way to love someone empathically is to give all of yourself to them. And number 3, people-pleasers have little to no real power in a relationship and tend to suffer as pushovers if they have a demanding partner. So let's dive into this. Now, the first myth, people-pleasing is a more emotionally honest and morally good way to be in a relationship, is not the case. The truth is that people-pleasing often blocks authenticity in love. Now, my online community members have often said things like, I don't want to ask my partner to do something they don't want to do because I know then if they do it, it's only because I asked and it's not because they want to. So I would ask, is that what you do? Do you do things to please your partner purely because they asked and not because any part of you wants to? Do you take absolutely no pleasure in your people-pleasing? Is it a complete drudgery to know what your partner truly desires without a doubt and to be able to provide that for them without having to drive yourself crazy trying to read their mind and figure it out? Do you never discover something new about yourself when your partner asks you to try something that you never considered trying? Have you never wound up enjoying something that you thought you'd hate? So when our partners inspire us to step right up to the edge of our comfort zones, that is when we feel impassioned. And when we authentically voice our needs and desires, regardless of how we fear they will be received, we step into our power. And when we stand by those things and become our own self-advocates, we call in a partner to step into their own alignment right there with us. And of course, those are the risks and the fruits of vulnerability. When we declare our needs and we ask that they be met, we are fully emotionally and authentically present, and we are showing up for ourselves, our partners, and the relationship. When we don't advocate for our desires because we're too busy people-pleasing, usually out of a fear of rejection or abandonment, we fail to show up honestly and authentically. And that is not in service of love or to the ultimate pleasure of your partner. In fact, you're denying your partner something in the people-pleasing. Because sometimes we people please as a way to distract our partners from the unworthiness that we feel about ourselves beneath all of the service providing. So it sounds something like, see how much you need me and couldn't live without me? Look at all the things I do for you. But don't look too closely because then you might see past the song and dance and maybe you'll judge me as unworthy and leave me. So people pleasers also tend to have beliefs like, I have to work hard to have a functional relationship. If I stop trying or initiating, nothing happens or would never get done. If I'm not earning love, then it's not true love. If my partner doesn't suffer as much as I suffer for them, then they don't really love me. I'll never find love unless I fix myself first, like lose weight, find a better job, etc. I always love my partners more than they love me. I'm not allowed to have needs or desires in a relationship because it always pushes my partner away. I'll always give more than I receive, and that's just the way it is. If you love someone unconditionally, eventually they'll come around. In the end, most people settle because it's just better than being alone. And for as much as they crave connection and being seen, people pleasers are also usually terrified of it. So they might express fears like, I'm afraid if my partner actually showed up in the ways that I want, that I might question why they love me and start to lose interest in them. I sometimes think if my partner looked too closely at me or at our relationship, they might find me unattractive, undesirable, or unworthy, so I prefer to date partners that keep me on my toes and preserve a bit of mystery in the relationship. I sometimes think if I could love my curmudgeon of a partner back to life, then I will have finally proven my worthiness. I will finally have demonstrated myself to be enough. But even when they pay me compliments, I feel uncomfortable and I can't take it in really. I don't know how to receive. I think I'm afraid if I finally got what I wanted, then I will be hurt twice as bad if it's ever taken away. And so this can keep people pleasers chasing after unavailable partners or partners that they think they can fix, because it solidifies and clarifies for them their role in relationships, and it doesn't threaten the attachment proximity or the type of intimacy that they're most familiar with, even if they are fundamentally dissatisfied with it. Now, the second myth that we were talking about here has to do with people pleasing stemming from empathy, and the truest way to love someone empathically is to give all of yourself to a partner. But the truth is that this reflects confusion around empathy versus self-abandonment. So if as a people pleaser you have empathy as a significant strength, you probably readily identify with other people's situations and you can see things clearly from their perspective. You probably find it relatively easy to put yourself in someone else's shoes and to appreciate not only what they are saying, but why they are saying it. And you have taken a keen interest in understanding in what makes people tick. You understand their underlying motivations and desires. So you might relate to statements like, I know my partner feels vulnerable and scared, even if they're acting in an immature way, because I know they had a difficult childhood. I put myself in their position and I appreciate what they're going through. Or you might relate to a statement like, I find myself automatically sensing what my partner is feeling and I'm fascinated by what makes people tick. I'll probe around more and more and I find it easy to see the world through their eyes. Now, for an anxious, open heart especially, they tend to feel their empathy gets them into trouble, and sometimes they think it weakens their personal boundaries in love. If they empathize deeply with the struggles of a partner, then they start to deprioritize their own needs and desires and can easily slip into people-pleasing mode. So that looks like waiting around too long for the reciprocation of loving feelings, assuming all the blame because you think if you are responsible for something going wrong, then it must be within your power to fix it. You bend over backwards to initiate contact and activities in the relationship. Maybe you make excuses for a partner when they're rude or inappropriate in social situations, or you bail them out when they're in a jam, either financially or with work or with family obligations. You might try to anticipate their wants in all facets of life, including sexually, and then you put on your best performance to make those things happen. You might pretend to like their hobbies and interests even if you don't particularly care for them. You might suppress your needs or your desires because you're afraid of voicing them will make you seem like a burden or stress your partner out too much, so on and so forth. Now, I want to point out here that empathy is different than self-abandonment. You don't have to give all of yourself to someone to properly love or empathize with them. It is a spectrum that we are dancing around here, one that is defined by a knowledge and a practice of fortifying your own personal boundaries in love and navigating the very real degrees of emotional influence that do exist in relationship. So how do you discern those boundaries? How do you discern those degrees of influence? Well, I want to offer you a few questions that might help you explore that spectrum. So, how much do I give to get? When do I start to feel resentful if I don't get back what I give in equal measure? When do I simply take pleasure in the act of giving for giving's sake? When does giving energize rather than deplete me? What beliefs do I have around selfishness? And how do they interfere with advocating for myself when I need to? Must I be totally selfless to avoid being selfish? Okay, so those are some questions to ask yourself. Now, the third myth that we're going to talk about here today is people pleasers have little to no real power in a relationship, and they tend to suffer as pushovers with a demanding partner. But the truth is, people pleasers also exert a measure of control, and a need for control is a need for connection. So sometimes we might also paint people pleasers in our minds as pushovers or doormats in a relationship, but trust me, people pleasers wield a lot of power and control. Over generosity is often not about surplus or abundance. Oftentimes, it's about compensating for the experience of scarcity, lack, or unworthiness, a need to prove something to ourselves or to others. And that means that it can also be about inducing a state of dependency in someone so as to exert control over a deep-seated fear of being abandoned or rejected and feeling helpless to stop it. So in other words, a part of us believes if they need me, they won't leave me. And I better make them need me so that they can't survive without me. And then a people pleaser might kind of lord that generosity over their partner, either aggressively or passive aggressively, through what I call the martyred syndrome. Now, of course, the problem with this is, as a people pleaser, you're always questioning whether or not they really love you for you, or if they love you for what you give and or do for them. You might also struggle with knowing who the real you is anyway if you get too preoccupied with that. And it might also help to understand that a need for control almost always comes from a desire to connect. So if we find ourselves criticizing or rejecting a desire to connect, as some Rolling Stones might, because we hate the idea of being controlled or being accused of being controlling, then we often get a torrent of defensive and over-intellectualized responses, and they're usually aimed at regaining control. But again, it's all about connection. So if we can focus on that it's all about connection, then we can release the people-pleasing as a form of defensive posturing that actually keeps the love you want out. Because if you can't let down the people-pleasing walls, inexplicably, it seems, your partner then gets turned off, or they lose interest, or they start to emotionally distance themselves. And that only makes us turn up the people-pleasing louder, and it becomes a snake that eats its own tail. So in short, people-pleasing, especially to the point of self-abandonment and need suppression, as I said before, it can become love's death knell. So if you find yourself getting caught in that trap, these are the words for you. This is a mantra that I want you to work with. I honor my needs no matter what, and they are valid no matter what. I honor my needs no matter what, and they are valid no matter what. So if this content has resonated with you here today, I invite you to simply type this mantra in the comments or in the chat box there. I honor my needs no matter what, and they are valid no matter what. I'm going to say it one more time. I honor my needs no matter what, and they are valid no matter what. Okay.